She walked into the quarterly review like she owned the building, which, technically, her husband did. At least, that's what everyone kept reminding us. I was standing near the back of the conference room, holding a binder nobody had asked me to hold, wearing a blazer I'd bought specifically because my direct manager told me, and I quote, "Clients take you more seriously when you don't look like you're still paying off student loans." I was 34 years old. I had an MBA from Ohio State, and I was invisible. Her name was Serena Blackwell, wife of Theodore Blackwell, the man who'd founded Blackwell Capital Partners 12 years ago and had, in the last three, essentially handed day-to-day operations to a management team while he played golf in Scottsdale and posted LinkedIn articles about servant leadership. Serena didn't work at the firm. She had what I'd come to understand was a more powerful position. She was a permanent fixture at firm events, charity dinners, client retreats, and she sat on the advisory board of the Meridian Club, which was the private membership club on the 14th floor of our building that basically every senior partner used for client lunches, drinks after close, and whatever else required a room that felt expensive and kept its mouth shut. I had never been inside the Meridian Club. I'd been with Blackwell Capital for 6 years. That day, Serena walked into our quarterly review. Not her meeting, not her firm, not her anything, and sat down at the head of the table like she'd been assigned that chair at birth. Our managing director, a man named Paul, who I had watched say nothing wrong in 6 years and nothing right in 6 years, smiled at her like she'd just brought him a birthday cake. She didn't acknowledge anyone below the director level, which meant she didn't acknowledge me, or the two analysts sitting beside me, or the junior associate named Kwame, who had genuinely the best financial models I'd ever seen and had been passed over for promotion twice in a row. Halfway through the meeting, I raised a concern about the Hartley portfolio, a mid-size account I'd been quietly managing additional exposure on for 4 months without title or compensation adjustment. I had numbers, I had a slide, I had done the work. Serena looked at me the way you look at a car alarm that won't stop. Then she turned back to Paul and said, "Is this something the senior team has already reviewed?" Paul said yes. They moved on. The slide I'd prepared stayed in my binder. After the meeting, I was in the elevator going back down to my floor. We were on 11. The Meridian Club was on 14, and somehow the geography of that building had always felt like a commentary. When Serena stepped in behind me, she was on her phone. She didn't look up. Then, without looking up, she held out her coat. A cream-colored wool coat, heavy. Dry cleaning tag still looped through the collar button. She just extended it toward me, like I was a coat rack that had wandered into her elevator. I looked at the coat. I looked at her. She was still on her phone. I said, "I'm sorry?" She finally glanced up. The look on her face was not irritation exactly. It was more like mild surprise, the way you'd react if a vending machine asked you a question. "Can you take this to the front desk? I don't want to carry it upstairs." I was in business casual. I had a conference room badge. I was holding a leather portfolio. I said, "I work here." She looked at my badge, looked back at her phone, said, "I know. That's why I'm asking." The elevator opened on my floor. I walked out. The coat went with her. That night, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 11 minutes before I drove home. Not because I was crying. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't crying. I was doing the thing I always do when something happens that I don't know what to do with yet. I was running numbers, not financial numbers. I mean the other kind. The kind where you calculate how long something has been building, how many times a version of this has happened, what the total is. The total was 6 years. The total was the Hartley portfolio and the passed over promotion and the binder no one asked for and the slide no one looked at. The total was significant. I went home. I made dinner. I didn't say anything about it to anyone. But I did open my laptop. I should tell you something about the Meridian Club because it matters. The Meridian Club was, on the surface, a private dining and lounge membership for finance professionals in our building and two neighboring towers in Midtown. Annual membership ran about $18,000. There were roughly 340 members. It had been operating for about 9 years. And for most of those 9 years, it had been profitable enough that no one looked too hard at the structure underneath it. I had looked too hard at the structure underneath it. Not intentionally, at first. 4 months earlier, I'd been pulling com data on a commercial real estate adjacent deal and found a filing that referenced Meridian Club Holdings LLC as a partial tenant in our building's lease structure, which was odd. So I pulled the LLC registration, which referenced a parent company, which led me to a Delaware shell that had been restructured twice in 3 years, which, if you know what you're looking at, is a pattern. I hadn't done anything with that information because it wasn't my job to do anything with it. I noted it. I filed it in a folder on my desktop I called My SC Research. I moved on. That night, after the elevator, I reopened the folder. I spent 3 weeks doing what I do, which is reading documents other people find boring. 990 filings, state regulatory disclosures, the Meridian Club's food service licensing renewals, which are public record in New York. UCC filings, 2 civil suits from 2021 that had been settled quietly. By the end of those 3 weeks, I understood something that the 340 members of the Meridian Club definitely did not. The club was in serious financial trouble. The LLC parent had extended its line of credit twice in 18 months. One of the silent partners had pulled out in October. That was in the restructuring paperwork. The management company had missed 2 quarterly reports to their state-registered agent, which isn't illegal exactly, but it's the kind of thing that happens when the people running the entity are managing chaos. The Meridian Club was not going to close tomorrow, but it was not going to survive the next 18 months without either a capital infusion or a buyer. I called my financial advisor on a Thursday morning. Her name is Claudette, and she has known me since I was 28 years old and trying to figure out if I could afford a 1-bedroom in Queens. And she has never once told me I was being unrealistic. She is the reason I have been putting 15% of my income into investments for 6 consecutive years instead of buying things that make me feel better temporarily. I said, Claudette, I want to talk about an acquisition. There was a pause. She said, Okay, tell me. The thing about acquiring a financially distressed membership club is that the members don't know it's happening. The transaction goes through the entity structure. The club keeps operating. The staff keeps working. The Hartley portfolio clients keep ordering the $42 salmon and pretending to look at the menu first. I had enough liquid capital between my investment accounts and a HELOC on my condo that I had never touched to serve as the lead individual investor. Claudette connected me with 2 other private investors. A woman who ran a boutique M&A advisory firm in Brooklyn and a semi-retired CFO who collected distressed hospitality assets the way other people collect wine. Neither of them knew me from anything, which meant they evaluated my proposal on its merits. The proposal had good merits. We signed the acquisition agreement on a Tuesday in February. The former ownership group was relieved. The staff was informed. The existing membership structure would be honored, meaning the 340 current members would keep their memberships under review, pending what the paperwork called an operational assessment period. I became the majority stakeholder of the Meridian Club on a Tuesday in February. I told no one at Blackwell Capital. I want you to understand. I didn't do this as a scheme. I didn't map out every step with the ending already written. I did it because it was a sound investment. I did it because I had done the work and I understood the asset, and I believed the club could be profitable again under competent management. The ending wrote itself. The operational assessment period lasted 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, I came into the office at Blackwell Capital every day, managed my accounts, sat in meetings, and watched Paul not look at my slides. I attended 2 firm events. I smiled appropriately. I updated my models. After hours, I met with the club's new general manager, a woman I'd brought in named Bonita, who had spent 12 years running private dining programs at 2 different hotel groups and had very strong opinions about linen napkins and very clear ideas about operational efficiency. Bonita and I went through every membership file. There are things you find when you go through membership files carefully. You find members who are current on dues and members who are not. You find members whose accounts are flagged for prior incidents. A noise complaint here, a billing dispute there. You find members who were added to the rolls not through the standard application process, but through what the previous management had been calling legacy referrals, which is a phrase that, when you trace it back, means someone important asked us to add them and we didn't ask questions. Serena Blackwell was a legacy referral. She had been added to the Meridian Club membership 5 years ago. She had never paid the annual membership fee. The notation in her file said Comp, Blackwell Capital Partnership. There was no corresponding agreement in the partnership files I'd been given at acquisition. It was just there, a favor someone had extended that had calcified into assumption. Her husband Theodore was also a member. He paid his dues. His account was clean. Serena's account had $4,200 in outstanding charges from the last 14 months, mostly in the dining room, a few in the private event space, all unpaid. I read this file on a Wednesday night at my kitchen table, drinking chamomile tea, and I felt something that I think you could only describe as the universe being tidy. I did not rush. I want to be clear about that too. I did not call her the next morning. I did not make a scene. I have never in my life made a scene, and I was not about to start. I waited. The Meridian Club had its spring member reception in March. It was a fixture on the calendar. Wine, past appetizers, the kind of event where people who already know each other stand around confirming that they still know each other. Under previous management, it had been a break-even event. Bonita had turned it into something worth attending. Better wine list, a chef's tasting component, a small live trio in the corner. I attended as what I was, not as a Blackwell Capital employee. As the owner, I wore a dark green dress I'd owned for 2 years and never had occasion to wear. I got there early enough to speak with Bonita and the staff before guests arrived. I stood near the window with a glass of wine and watched people come in. I watched Paul come in. I watched 3 senior partners come in. I watched Theodore Blackwell come in, shake hands with someone near the bar, and look around the room in the way that men like him look around rooms, assessing attendance like it's a metric. And then Serena came in. She was wearing a different coat this time, dark camel cashmere. She handed it to the coat check attendant with a particular wrist motion of someone who has been handing coats to people their entire adult life. She did not see me, or if she did, I didn't register. I was still furniture. She got a glass of champagne. She found her people. Two women from the firm's client relations circle, a partner's wife, someone I didn't recognize. She laughed at something. She was comfortable. This was her room. I gave it 40 minutes. Then I walked over to Bonita, who was standing near the check-in table, and I nodded. Bonita nodded back. She picked up the small portfolio she kept with her at events and walked towards Serena's group. I followed, one step behind. Bonita said, "Mrs. Blackwell, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm Bonita Reyes, the general manager. Could I speak with you for just a moment about your membership account?" Serena turned with the pleasant half attention of someone who expects this conversation to last 15 seconds. "Of course," Bonita said. "We've been conducting an account review as part of our transition to new ownership, and I wanted to address a few items personally, as a courtesy." "New ownership?" Serena said. "Yes," I said. She looked at me. That same calibration process, badge, clothes, context. The same mild question, forming behind her eyes. I said, "I'm the majority owner of the Meridian Club. We completed the acquisition in February." The champagne glass didn't move. She was good. I'll give her that. "I wasn't aware," she said. "We haven't made a broad announcement yet," I said. "We wanted to complete the account review first." Benita opened the portfolio. "Your membership was added in 2019 as a complimentary arrangement," she said, in the tone of someone reading a weather report. "However, we've reviewed our records, and there's no active agreement supporting that arrangement under the current ownership structure. Additionally, there are outstanding charges totaling $4,200 on your account." Serena looked at Bonita, then back at me. "I'm sure this is a miscommunication. My husband's firm has had a relationship with this club for years." "Theodore's membership is in good standing," I said. "This is specific to your account." "I'd like to speak with the owner," she said. "You are," I said. A small pause. One of her companions took a half step back. The quartet in the corner was playing something by Chet Baker. It was a very nice evening. "I'm not sure what you think you're doing," Serena said. Her voice had dropped. Not a whisper, but close. "I'm conducting an operational review," I said. "Standard procedure after an acquisition. We're honoring existing member agreements. We don't have an agreement for your membership. My husband is welcome here. His account is current." I kept my voice even. I had been keeping my voice even for 6 years in conference rooms, and I was extremely good at it. "We'll need to resolve the outstanding balance and formalize a membership agreement for you, or we'll need to close the account." She looked at me for a long moment. I looked back. "I'll have my assistant call on Monday," she said. "That would be great," I said. I handed her a card. Not my Blackwell Capital card, a different one. Cream-colored cardstock, my name, the club's address, my direct line. "We're happy to work something out." She took the card. She did not look at it. She turned back to her companions. The conversation moved on. Chet Baker kept playing. Bonita and I walked back to the other side of the room. "That was it?" Bonita said quietly. That was it, I said. Her assistant did not call on Monday. On Wednesday, I received a call from Paul at Blackwell Capital. He'd heard, through whatever channel these things travel, that there'd been an incident at the club's spring reception involving Serena and some staff member. He wanted to understand what had happened. I told Paul I wasn't a staff member. I told him I was the owner. There was a silence on the line that lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. You bought the Meridian Club, he said. Majority stakeholder, I said. February acquisition. Another silence. I wasn't aware, he said. A lot of people weren't, I said. To his credit. And I'll give it to him. Even though my credit card for Paul is nearly maxed out, he recovered quickly. He said he'd need to look into the membership arrangements on the firm's Thailand. I said that would be fine. I'd send over the relevant account documentation for their review. He said, Is there anything we need to be concerned about here? I said, Paul, I've been managing the Hartley portfolio for 4 months. I put a slide together about it in November that you didn't look at. I'd say there are some things worth reviewing, yes. I heard him exhale. I said, But that's a separate conversation. One thing at a time. Serena's account was formally closed the following week. The $4,200 was written off. I wasn't interested in the money. I was interested in the record. Theodore's membership was renewed at the standard rate. He called me directly, actually, which I hadn't expected. He was gracious. He said he hoped there were no hard feelings. I said I didn't have hard feelings. I had a business to run. What happened next at Blackwell Capital is a longer story, and maybe I'll tell it another time. The short version is that the Hartley portfolio conversation did happen, and it went better than I expected. And by June, I had a title that matched the work I'd been doing. But here's what I actually want to tell you, because it's the part nobody talks about when they talk about moments like this. I wasn't angry at the reception. I know that sounds strange. I'd been angry in the parking garage, in my car, in those 11 minutes of silence after the elevator. But by the time I was standing in that room in my dark green dress, watching Bonita open the padfolio, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just clear. That's the thing that changes when you stop waiting for someone to notice the work and you start building something that makes the work undeniable. The anger gets replaced by something quieter and harder. Not coldness, clarity. I had done the math. I had made the calls. I had read the boring documents at my kitchen table at 11 at night, while other people were watching television or sleeping or doing things that felt more immediately satisfying. And then one day, I was standing in a room that had my name on the lease and handing out business cards. And the woman who'd handed me her coat in an elevator was looking at me like she was trying to figure out when the geography had shifted. The geography had been shifting for 6 years. She just hadn't been paying attention. That's the other thing about being furniture. People stop expecting you to move. Right up until you own the building. I've thought a lot about that elevator moment. Not the coat itself. The coat was just fabric and entitlement stitched together. What I keep coming back to is how ordinary it felt. She didn't do it because she was having a bad day. She didn't do it out of spite, exactly. She did it because the math in her head was simple and she'd never had a reason to question it. I was standing there. Therefore, I was available. Therefore, the coat was my problem now. That's what invisibility actually costs you. Not the big dramatic moments. The 1,000 small ones where someone does the math and puts you on the wrong side of the equation without even thinking about it. I didn't go home that night and decide to burn her world down. I want to be honest about that. I went home and I sat in my car and I counted 6 years. The Hartley portfolio, the slide nobody looked at, Kwame's promotions that never came, the conference room where I held a binder nobody asked me to hold because apparently that's what I was there for. What I did next wasn't revenge exactly. It was just what happens when you stop asking to be seen and start building something that makes looking away impossible. The work I put into that acquisition, the nights reading LLC filings and UCC disclosures and food service licensing renewals, while other people were doing literally anything else. That was the same work I'd been putting into Blackwell Capital accounts for 6 years. Same discipline, same attention, same willingness to sit with boring documents until they told me something useful. The only difference was that this time I owned the outcome. That's the part nobody tells you. You don't wake up one day with clarity and confidence handed to you. You build it the same way you build anything worth having. Slowly, in the background, while people who underestimate you are busy doing other things. Serena wasn't evil. I don't think she went home that night and thought about what she'd done in the elevator. That's almost the whole point. She didn't think about it at all. And that's exactly why, when I handed her that card at the reception, and she looked at me and tried to recalibrate, I wasn't angry. I was just finished waiting. There's something that happens when you make a decision based entirely on what you know to be true about yourself and the work you've done. The noise goes quiet. Other people's assumptions about you stop mattering. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped needing their version of the story to be accurate. Bonita asked me afterward if that was it, if that was the whole plan. And the honest answer is that it wasn't a plan in the way people mean when they say that word. Mapped out, calculated, satisfying in a cinematic way. It was just the natural end of a long sequence of choices I'd made about what to do with my time and my energy and the information I happened to have access to. The code didn't start anything. It just clarified something I'd already been figuring out for a long time. You can wait for someone to recognize what you're worth. Or you can build something that makes the conversation irrelevant. I chose the second one. I don't regret it.